Hi, I'm David Barella. Today I do an interview with two of the team members who created a website for the National Geographic Channel. The website was a companion website to a new movie that the National Geographic Channel have created, which focuses on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. There's some interesting technical aspects of the website, such as how they designed it around responsive design. So it looks great on a big desktop monitor, but then it scales down onto a smaller device, such as an iPad. They also hooked into the iPad so that if you used it with a gyroscope, you could pan through and see a parallax effect in some of the scenes. Here's the interview. I hope you enjoy it.
So, Joe, Kenji, let's just jump straight into it. What is the website? How did the idea come about?
Killing Kennedy is the companion website to the National Geographic's Channel's television program about the life and death of both Kennedy and Oswald. We set out to make a web companion to the TV show, retelling both of their stories and trying to do it in a new, innovative way as much as we could. It shows the parallels of both men's lives from birth to death. It talks about the similarities and differences, and it does it with a sort of unique dual two-direction scroll mechanic that is a sort of also parallels the way the story works. As Kennedy and Oswald go different directions in their lives, the story also, or the website also moves in different directions and eventually meets, I don't want to give anything away, but it eventually meets in Dealey Plaza in Dallas. And one of the two dies. I'm not going to tell you which.
Hashtag spoilers.
Yes, spoiler alerts will be in this interview, yes.
Sure. So we'll dive more into how the website was created, what technologies, etc. But let's find out some more information about the two of you first. So what previous projects have you both of you worked on? How did you both get into this industry? Because most of our viewers are typical developers, whereas both of you are from a different type of industry. So could you dive into that a bit more?
Sure.
You go first.
Yes, absolutely. So I got into the industry. I started out as kind of like an interactive designer, motion designer, someone who does like a lot of After Effects, a lot of kind of animations, dynamic kind of procedural generated animations. Mostly Flash is what I got my roots in. And then kind of Flash is kind of going the way of the dinosaur, so I started to pick up more on JavaScript, and I have been doing that for a while now. Same stuff, now JavaScript, but I've been in advertising for a while now, jumped across a bunch of industries. I've actually worked in Australia, and that's kind of how I ended up where I am right now.
Cool. My school background is computer engineering. And like pretty quickly doing that, I realized I didn't want to do that. It was really, it wasn't my thing. It was the hardware's great, but and now I know it, and I don't want to do that anymore. I kind of fell into advertising accidentally. I was in college teaching myself how to make web pages, and someone started paying me to do it, and one thing led to another. I got a gig at the Barbarian Group, which I worked at pretty happily for 8 years, did some pretty cool websites there, doing mostly front-end development, HTML, CSS type stuff. I did that for 8 years, so I've probably been doing this business for maybe 12 years or something. I've been at Mullen for a couple of years, working my way in the, we have a creative technology department that is some people more creative focused and some people more technology focused, and I tend towards the former. I've spent a lot more time working on technological ideas than necessarily programming, and that's where I'm at now.
Oh, Joe, it's funny that you said you're in Flash, but because that's dying, you find yourself transition over to JavaScript more and more, because us developers have been finding that a lot of us were on Silverlight, or other desktop technologies, and we're all finding ourselves being migrated to JavaScript as well. So it's funny to see that parallel on your side.
Sure. I mean, both are still, they obviously have their strengths. You know, they're still used today for a lot of different things. I mean, Flash isn't going away too soon. Silverlight, same with that. But it seems like the trend is to progress more towards HTML5 or just kind of like standard markup driven things, no plugins. So it's great to have the background in it, and it wasn't too rough of a transition. So.
Sure. Now, both of you work in the advertising world. So, what is that like?
Oh, it's terrible. No, it's great. It's great. It's really, I mean, as compared to a more traditional shop, traditional development focused kind of shop, I mean, I think the main difference is fast pace, quick projects, quick deadlines, but a lot of stuff. So what's always been interesting to me about advertising is that if you don't like the project you're working on, you're not behind the idea, you don't love the way it's being made, you'll be on something else in a couple weeks, honestly. Right. For the most part, stuff moves really quick. You're usually doing several different projects at once for different clients. And there's almost always like one thing that you're working on that at least interests you enough to keep going in it.
Definitely. I think Kennedy was actually the longest project that I've ever worked on, because it's such a quick turnaround of projects in advertising that Kennedy, I'm sure we'll get to this later, but it lasted about 6 months or 7 months of development, conception to production to launching. So, which
is unusually long. I mean,
it's pretty long.
Typical stuff is a few months.
Yeah. Another really good thing is that, it's an agency. It's not technical people everywhere. So you're kind of like a liaison into this world where they might not understand, oh, I've seen this is done. Some other company did this. How do they do this? How can we do it? What are the limitations? You're speaking on behalf of the tech industry, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people come in and are like, hey, I just saw this great idea for it's Twitter, but it's in outer space and it's upside down and in 3 dimensions. Like, we really got to do it. And I'll say like, oh, well, okay, like you have to look at the way they actually made that. It's not possible to do that. Let's bring this back towards something that's possible and doable in the timeline that we have. I mean, that's like literally the only strength I bring to this industry.
Yeah. Or I mean, like if they say something that's outlandish, say, that's going to take about 1.5 years to make and millions of dollars, or this is a good compromise that, will take 2 weeks to make and it'll cost us nothing. So it's about kind of knowing, it's about having that skill set and knowing how to apply it to greater advertising campaigns and kind of influencing them from the ground up.
Sure. So does it also mean that you have more stakeholders than usual? So if you're working with a National Geographic channel, did you have some of their, legal team having to put in more input than you would have with a standard development team? You've got more external people trying to put, more constraints on you than usual.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of players involved. From a development side, we had the luxury of kind of building it how we wanted to build it in terms of behind the scenes. But in terms of storytelling, in terms of the message that we're trying to convey, in terms of the content that we're allowed to use, there's a whole army behind the scenes. Without them, we'd be screwed. Sure, like we all step on each other's toes every now and then, but like for a project of this magnitude and projects of smaller magnitude, there's always a team that kind of builds out the framework of what we're trying to do, and then we try to conform to that. So it's very collaborative in that respect.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a positive and negative with all the people. I mean, part of what's great about doing ad industry stuff is that you've got people whose jobs are just to be a liaison between us and the client, the National Geographic Channel. We've got people who just keep us in line and make sure we put code out in time. There's people who just do
quality assurance.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, there's that's a lovely part, is that you don't have to spend so much time wearing so many hats and handling all that stuff yourself. You've got people who are experts, who are better at those specific things than us. And I would say, National Geographic Channel is one of our more interesting clients in terms of the freedom they've given us to create stuff like this. I mean, there's always legal at the end, there's always legal review, there's always the chance to have to take stuff out that you've worked hard on, but it is certainly more freedom with that client than your average client.
Okay. So with the project, did the project itself dictate which technologies you're going to use, or were you guys proficient in a few technologies and so you just did the project with the technologies that you knew? Which way around did you tackle this from?
I mean, to refer to what we were just saying about having that like technical knowledge like in our heads and having a good idea of what's possible and what isn't, we try to go, I mean, as much as possible to go idea first, creative first, like let's think of the greatest thing we can, and then figure out, is there a way to implement this?
Right.
That said, I think we've got that sort of internal filter that like won't let us come up with absolutely impossible ideas. And so with this thing, we tried real hard to come up with a bleeding edge concept that was also, we knew would be executable from the get-go.
Yeah. We came up with a concept that we knew would be executable, but during this whole process, there was lots of trial, error, learning, you know, pushing what we knew on personal levels to like the next level, I guess you could say.
Sure. What was the time like for the project? The number of developers and designers that worked on it. What was some of the early stages of the project? Just give me an idea of the end-to-end timeline that you had.
End to end, it was probably about 7 months. So we started with, you know, we knew what the story was. We knew what we needed to tell, but we didn't quite know how to tell it. So coming up with the construct of kind of this duality of Kennedy and Oswald kind of going in opposite directions but ending up in the same place, that was a concept that was come up with early on. So we had the luxury of that. But we also had to figure out how we were going to tell the events within the story, how we were going to align, oh, Kennedy is in the White House. Oh, so Oswald is in Minsk. So there's a major amount of like information architecture, a major amount of research, tons of sourcing, tons of, from the tech side, exploratory things like how do we build out parallax? How do we fake scrolling on a site that's 2 gigs long, so we have to custom make a preloader that loads it up in like 1.5 seconds. It's kind of like everyone, once we had the concept, maybe a month in, everyone going full steam at what they do best and trying to find the solutions to the challenges that a project of this magnitude poses.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So the development was probably like 3 months.
It's a typical, I mean, and it's a fairly typical, I mean, we didn't do it in a strictly waterfall fashion. We parallel pathed a lot of different things, but as is typical with these kinds of things, you've got like just sort of random creative people at the beginning coming up with the idea. Then you bring on, you flow in some people to write copy and to start making the pretty pictures. And then after that, you start working in, you know, the information architects, the experienced design people. And then there's a big dev push near the end. Design's still happening throughout,
right,
because we had so much to do. But that's not unusual for this kind of ad industry project, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive into some more of the cool technical stats. So I think you guys mentioned you did up a little binder of all of the technical aspects of the.
Oh, you mean this little binder?
Yeah, that's it.
So, here you go.
Okay, thanks.
So that one.
These are comps. This is, we did an internal presentation. We've done a bit of showing this work around the agency. So to help people understand the magnitude of what's gone into this, we've already printed this stuff up. And we've got this book here is the 150 or so comps that went into making the website. I mean, here's midway through Oswald's life, where this is actually part of JFK's story, where we are in Cuba. We're going through the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we're looking at Allen Dulles, head of the CIA. But yeah,
so you've made your own special edition, the making of coffee table art book.
This is for people who don't have, you know, power or something. This is a great way to experience the website.
Yeah. This is a little bit less exciting if you don't know code for a coffee table book, but this is we actually had to split the code base into 2 books because it was too big for one binding. But this is all the HTML for the site. This is all the Ruby on Rails, all the MongoDB, all the SCSS, tons and tons and tons of stuff in here, and it's kind of just amazing just to feel it, because you never think about code and weight.
You should print out your code sometime. It's really satisfying. You'd be surprised.
Yeah. So I think we have like 5,000 lines of SCSS or Sass in here. I'm not sure what's the stat for.
Oh, I got all kinds of numbers here. Yeah, the 5,000 lines of Sass, which compiles into probably 10,000 lines of straight up CSS.
Yeah, 7,500 lines of HTML handlebars, templates, etc.
Over 1,000 tickets filed in our ticketing system.
Yep.
And then this fellow.
This guy is just the JavaScript for the project. So clearly, it was a very JavaScript heavy project. 30,000 plus lines of custom JavaScript.
Not including libraries, plugins, etc.
Right, exactly.
There's not a print out of jQuery in here.
jQuery's not in there.
No, that's legit. That's handwritten.
Right.
Roughly 750 lines written per day for the entire 7 months of the project.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, which is pretty wild. I mean, code length isn't necessarily a virtue. Obviously, you want to make things efficiently too, but
Right. The challenges that we were up against required a lot of kind of like very nitpicky code. You know, it had to be responsive. It had to have parallax influence based on mouse position and across browsers for mobile devices. It had to be accelerometer influenced. It had to load quick. Everything had to be like very quick, because I mean, on the website, lots of things are moving all the time, and you get bottlenecks in terms of browser rendering when you have too many things running behind the scenes as you're rendering. So we had to optimize everything. So this is optimized code. It's not minified, but it's optimized, which is pretty crazy. We were talking about trying to change the way we build clients by pounds of code instead of actual projects now.
So you mentioned JavaScript, Sass, jQuery. Did you just use raw jQuery and Handlebars, or did you use a bunch of other frameworks to help you out with it?
We used pretty much raw jQuery to get at, essentially all we used it for was setting CSS on the fly using JavaScript on a bunch of elements all the time, and also caching the instances of those elements just into the memory of the browser. So we would never have to do multiple lookups. It's kind of like hit the page, there's an element, find it with jQuery, store it, save it, and then use jQuery again to set the CSS. In terms of other libraries, we used Video.js for the video players. We also used Sound Manager 2 for all the background and kind of ambient sound effects and the soundscapes.
Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of, there's like 2 levels of sounds on the site. There are background music tracks that go between each chapter, kind of according to mood and need. And then there's a lot of almost like Foley type sound from the films. Like a Foley artist in films he gets the coconuts and bangs them together to make it sound like there's a horse going. We did a lot of that stuff too. When Kennedy is standing in front of the woods, that you can hear birds chirping and little ambient sound effects like that help to like build out what that helped put you in the scene a little bit more deeply.
Yeah.
Yeah, the background sounds freaked me out because I loaded up the website on the background, then forgot it was there. I've got 50 other browser tabs open, and then I've got sound coming out from my speakers, and I don't know where it's coming from. I have to flick through all of my tabs. Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yep. Sometimes I hear it and it's not even playing. It's just 6 months of work will do that to you.
You get sick of all of it, really. Yeah. But it was fun making those sounds. That was a really good time.
Yeah.
So you guys mention quite often that you've created the website and it works well on desktop machines, but also on mobile devices. Did you just try to replicate the same experience across desktop and mobile, or did you try to tailor the experiences for the different form factors? How did you approach this?
So we designed the site with safe areas in mind. So we kind of took the aspect ratio of like someone's screen, and then their desktop screen, and then we took the aspect ratio of someone's mobile device, which is portrait versus landscape, and from that we figured out where we need to show the most important content. So it's kind of like a middle section that we call the safe area, where anything that was very important in terms of imagery had to fall within those boundaries. So that kind of was a guide for us in terms of designing and developing.
And we did that from the beginning. I mean, that was a key. I worked on a lot of things where you build it out, you build out the website, and you've been looking at it in Chrome the whole time, Firefox the whole time, and then you're done. You're like, oh, now I got to make this work in this. Now I got to make it work in this. Because we did prototyping really early on, we knew we were working with a framework that would scale well to the other platforms and even with working with design at the very beginning, having the safe areas, which is a film technique, we didn't have to go back and if they were able to build it across all those plaques from the beginning.
Right, right. I mean, there's all sorts of the standard media queries behind the scenes that kind of scale things accordingly to how they need to be. A lot of the resizing is done in JavaScript just because the style of every element on the page is essentially controlled by the parallax controller. So it's the style of it is constantly being reset. So in order for scaling or window adjustment sizes or jumping from a device to a desktop, in order for that to happen, a lot of stuff had to be carried out and calculated through the JavaScript behind the scenes. So we built kind of one site, and we're very conscious throughout the whole process about how it would behave, how it would look, how it would function on the whole spectrum of devices and platforms.
We took we also did that when we were building up the content for the website as well. So there's it's sort of an internal nomenclature. We've got primary content, we've got secondary content. If you use the website, you'll see there's stuff that comes up in front of you and is presented to you as you scroll. And then there are certain points in the site where you can get in and explore and look at Kennedy family photos or look at Oswald's gun purchase certificates and stuff. That stuff, we structured the content so that you could understand the whole story just by looking at that first level, that primary content. The secondary stuff would only add to the experience. So when we built out the site, or when we developed for mobile and you're looking at it on a smaller screen, you're not going to sit on the mobile site for like an hour and read this whole story. It's a quicker experience. So we don't even present that secondary information to you on mobile. We give you the bare bones, not the bare bones, but all the information you need to just understand the story if you're consuming it that way, and that's what you see when you look at it on a telephone.
Okay, so it's kind of the next step for responsive design, rather than responsive design going from your desktop to just reformatting for the mobile. You actually didn't just do the formatting, but also the content. You were reformatting the content because, as you said, they just want smaller bite-sized chunks rather than consuming the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's more consistent with how people would want to use the site.
Yeah. I think you did the inputs between the desktop and the mobile different. So on the desktop you had mouse-driven, but you used a different technique for the iPads and the other mobile devices?
On the desktop, we used mouse and keyboard to kind of control the scenes. So up and down arrows work. Not a lot of people use them, but they're there if you want them. And you could also click and drag on the background and kind of throw it, almost like you're using your finger on a mobile device. But there's also the scroll, obviously the scroll wheel. So what we had to do for actually the scrolling was rewrite how scrolling worked in the browser, because there isn't really a page that's like 50 sections long. It's kind of just content sitting above the frame and below the frame, and when you scroll, the stuff that's on the screen goes out, disappears, gets removed from the DOM, clears from memory, and the stuff that was once outside of the frame pulls in kind of a seamless, scalable fashion. So how we handled scrolling was actually perfect for how we handled loading, because you only need the section that's right above the section you're on or right below the section you're on. But
I think that was one of the things you spent the most time on in the development, was
painful.
getting that scrolling right. I mean, it's your primary way of interacting with the site. It's the main thing you do. Once you show up, you start scrolling, and whether that's two-finger scroll on a trackpad, whether that's a mouse wheel scroll, whether it's using the arrow keys, like, it all had to be awesome. And like, there were so many iterations that weren't quite awesome.
Right.
It seemed painful for you.
It was painful. But let's see what else. The mouse movement, anywhere you put the mouse on any screen, except for the secondary content, would manipulate the positions of images in the background or images in the foreground. It's all kind of built on this custom parallax, framework. So everything has like a certain depth relative to everything else. So if something's in the foreground really close and you move your mouse across the screen, it'll move really far. But if something's in the background and you move your mouse across the screen, it'll move slightly, but just enough to give you that illusion of depth. And that effect for mobile we decided to do the obvious thing and take control of the accelerometer. So
That was awesome. When I first loaded up on the iPad, and like, wait, why is it moving? Oh, okay, it's actually gyroscope. Yeah.
Yeah. We have easing on that. It kind of feels not too intrusive. That was the goal. Make it cool, but make it so you can read what you're trying to read and not have it slide all over the screen like crazy. So I think we found a good balance with that, especially in the easing that it's in. It's not like immediately reactive to however you move. What else?
Well, with the gyroscope, so it works on the iPad. Did you just use Hook so it only works on the iPad, or does it work with any browser that says, hey, I've got a gyroscope in it?
That it works with any browser that says it has a gyroscope in it.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the challenging things of introducing the gyroscope into the website was that the images are to be full bleed on every single section. So as you kind of tilt down, if you're on an iPad, you have to see, you can't see just black underneath the image. The images have to kind of always be a little bit off screen and then move up and be kind of flush with the bottom of whatever your viewport is, no matter what. So everything has that kind of parallax, I guess, effect by design, even parts that you might not even consider, just so it's kind of one seamless full bleed experience.
Right, because obviously photos taken in the 60s weren't taken in 3D, so you get that like classic problem where you talk to the photo retoucher guy and you're like, can you get that guy out of the picture? I want to see what's behind him. Like, you know, we're dealing with classic, archival photography here, and so presumably Ken Burns has already solved this problem as well, but you know, when you've got that battleship in the foreground and you've got the back of the ocean behind it and you scroll it over, well, what was there? What fills in there? And
right.
That's where it helped to, again, be at an ad agency that has a whole army of photo retouchers and people who like do this stuff much better than we'd be able to.
The art production and the production design teams were like lifesavers. We wouldn't have been able to make anything quite as cool as if it wasn't for them.
Sure, yeah, I get you, because if you just have the photo and then you just cut out the battleship, you just see a black silhouette of where the battleship was as it's in front, so...
Exactly.
We had to realize what was actually behind them.
Well, and then there was the sort of climactic bit of the site where you're in Dealey Plaza and Kennedy's coming around that corner and passing in front of the book depository. That was that was all taken. Those were all shots that were comped together. So we had Secret Service photography that was taken the day after when they were investigating. And the difference between then and the time of the assassination is that obviously there's a lot of people on the streets. The presidential motorcade was going through. So we had this raw photography that's beautiful and period and looks wonderful, but it doesn't have any of that stuff. So our art production guys like actually researched the size of the crowds at the time and where the motorcade would have been and combined several different photographs. So you've got that 3-shot sequence where you are on the ground in Dealey Plaza, and then you move up and you're looking over Lee Harvey Oswald's shoulder down into the plaza, looking down at the motorcade just over his shoulder, looking through the sights. That stuff we all had to like not totally invent out of whole cloth, but we had to combine a lot of existing resources to make something that you truly have never seen before.
Mm. So that sounds like that would have been one of the most difficult parts of the project, just all of the artwork. So how, all of the assets that are with the website, like how many gigabytes worth of data of assets do you have, and how much are you actually sending down to the clients whenever they're looking at this?
So all right, so I guess the entire site was 2.38 gigabytes. I know that I spent a long time trying to get it to load efficiently, so we didn't need like a 6-minute preloader. But we got it down to 1.3 megabytes on initial load.
Oh.
And in terms of how we showed the client and how they kind of worked with us to kind of like move forward at each step, we talked through a lot of the functionality, but where'd that other little binder go?
Oh, this thing?
Yeah. So we pretty much worked with them and showed them these visuals that kind of like, you know, would let them know exactly how it's going to work, exactly how it's going to function. I mean, if I were to sit down and kind of explain what Kennedy and Oswald does behind the scenes, it would be very, very like hard to put into words. So
Because it's so emotional.
because yeah, it's hard to talk with all these tears in my mouth. But there's a lot of technical stuff behind the scenes that impacts all the visuals and how the user experiences the site. So having those kind of art assets to show and kind of being there to walk through and kind of strategize about how people are going to interact with it, that was kind of our communications, and that's how we got through and made the product that we did.
So did you have any other big challenges on the project, either technical or just how the project was run?
So one of the technical challenges was making sure it runs on lots of devices and lots of platforms. One of the mandates was that it had to run on iPad 2, and it also had to run on IE8. So we had to build a lot of kind of, I wouldn't even say graceful degradation because you don't even notice it's degrading, but we had to build in a lot of redundancies to fall back on. So for IE8, there's no transforms, there's no 3D transforms. Let me step back. In an ideal situation, we use 3D transforms, so we get nice kind of like soft blending of subpixels. So if you're moving the mouse around really slowly and things on the screen are moving around really slowly, the edges are able to render in kind of like a subpixel way. So you don't get the jaggy jumping of like, oh, 1 pixel left, 1 pixel down, 1 pixel left, 1 pixel down. So ideally, we took advantage of the hardware acceleration of 3D transforms on everything. When that wasn't available, we fell back to just 2D transforms in CSS, which were pretty good, not hardware accelerated, so you noticed a little bit of drop in performance. But ultimately, what it fell back to, and then back to again for browsers that didn't have those options like IE8, we just used top and left position. And amazingly, it worked really well. There's a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes because the responsiveness of the site is, we apply scale transforms if someone makes their browser bigger, or we scale them down if it's like a small little device. But we had to scrap all the transforms in the case of browsers that didn't have transforms. So there's all sorts of algorithms behind the scenes that sets inline CSS using top, left, height, and width, and JavaScript 60 times a second on a request enter frame figures out exactly what the coordinates and what the dimensions should be. So cross-browser support, cross-platform support, biggest challenge, hands down, from my end.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously Joe did a lot more programming on this than I did, and I was very heavily involved in the content development stuff up front. So the big challenge for me right from the beginning was like we have this idea, we have this story we want to tell, we have these 2 stories we want to tell. How do we communicate what that story is going to be down the line from the people that write the words, the people that make the art, and the people who actually implement it? To that end, we didn't really know how we were going to build it. Typically, when we go to make a website for, like, it's a bank, it's got an About Us section, it's got a Open an Account with Us section, and it's got a yeah. So it's got these, and what we'll do internally is we'll tell a copywriter, hey, there's going to be these 3 sections on the site. We need you to write in a Word doc for us what the words are going to be on each thing. Send that to the developers, and the developers apply it to a template. Like every content page looks this way, every video page looks this way. This thing is a totally linear experience. It's closer to a film than it is to a traditional templated, siloed website. And so we had to invent a process. I sent you guys a photo of our crazy war room, which we kind of refer to as the beautiful mind room. And we didn't know, myself and our XD, Mark, kind of just went in there and started cutting everything out of little pieces of paper. We took all the copy we had written, all the possible images we were going to be able to get a hold of that were archival, and we started just putting things up on the wall and kind of figuring it out spatially first. And we made a column for Kennedy and a column for Oswald, and we worked through each of the chapters that way, and we figured out how much of the Kennedy story can we tell before we switch you over to the Oswald story. Where's a good place to do that break that tells you something about both of those men or shows you something they have in common, or where can their stories overlap and we can tell both of them at the same time. In like late adolescence, both men were in the military. Kennedy was in the Navy, Oswald was in the Marines, and there's a nice section there where we're able to say, like, we're able to show you how
Draw the parallels.
The paths could have been more similar than you think. They were both very crazy, unusually ambitious men who wanted to make a difference. They obviously went in very different directions to do it. So, like, figuring out how to tell that story and take the copy and do something unconventional with it was a challenge and a super rewarding thing to do in the end. It was really fun.
So you're using paper prototypes for it?
Yeah, we have the original paper prototype here. So we did 3 prototypes, and this was the least technological of it. But the original idea here being that you'd start out with a one man's face, and then you'd scroll one bit, and then it would lock back in here, and you'd see some facts, and then you'd scroll a little bit further, and then you'd see a new thing that maybe crosses both men's paths. And so, like, we came up with some other prototypes that were all digital and were more explorations of, like, what can we do with CSS 3D. And it turned out that the idea that had the most legs...
in terms of storytelling.
Yeah, in terms of storytelling, in terms of, like, really getting everything done, was the least technologically complex of the prototypes that we came up with. And certainly, I mean, paper is less complicated than bits and bytes. But it gave us a nice base to then go totally crazy on preloading and parallax and some of the interesting stuff we wanted to do. Whereas if we had started with a really complicated base, you can only build so high up from that.
One other cool feature that you guys mentioned to me was because it's a companion app, you tied it in with the National Geographic, the premiere screening of it.
Right. So the site was designed to be a companion for the website, which it is, but it's also kind of this real-time syncing experience during the premiere. So during the premiere, users who went to the site, I'm pretty sure that we prompted them.
I think there were some commercials during the broadcast.
If they went to the website, we knew the time codes. We knew when the premiere was happening. We knew when it was happening Eastern Standard Time, Pacific, Central, Alaska, Hawaii. We knew when it was going to broadcast in each of those time zones. And we knew the actual time codes of what's happening during the show according to the hour. Was it 2 hours? Hour and a half?
I think it was an hour and a half.
Yeah, hour and a half broadcast. So we were able to say, hey, at 30 minutes into the premiere, Kennedy is talking to, Marilyn Monroe or whatever. So we knew in our site, hey, we have that event in ours, so we could prompt users on the fly if they have the site open, catch up with the TV show. If you want to learn more information about what you're watching right now, just click a sync button and it'll take you right to where you need to be. So it was very much an extension of the TV show and even more so the premiere.
I mean, it's exciting for us. I mean, I love television as a medium, but I'm more in love with the internet. I've been doing it my whole life. Well, my whole money-making career. And to me, like, it's awesome that you can tell the beauty of television. You've got a singular focus, and there's no other options but to just go through the story in this way. What's beautiful about the way we can tell stories is that you can pick up a little bit of it, or if you're really interested in Kennedy's relationship with Marilyn Monroe, you can come to the website, and whereas the TV show might only spend a minute or two on the topic, you can come to the website and go deep into that and look at pictures of behind the scenes at the birthday gala and see her singing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," and the thing that was parodied on Wayne's World, and we've all been imagining our whole lives. You can really get into it and watch the 5-minute video of that right there.
Yeah, and it's also kind of interesting to have the ability to, if you're watching the show, which is a docudrama, it's kind of all actors, to actually jump back to the actual stock photography of when these events actually happened and kind of see the actual history of it rather than kind of the dramatized.
Yeah, so that was the coolest aspect of about the website for me. So it wasn't just a standalone website with your own story timeline. You actually tried to tie it in with the premiere screening. And we've seen for years TV shows trying to tie in applications, either from you've got the actors on the screen and you can click, hey, I want to buy what what that actor's wearing, or Microsoft are doing it with gaming now with the Xbox One Smart Glass, trying to tie in gaming with having a companion app. So while you're playing the game, oh, I actually want more information on the history of Rome. So they're doing that with on Xbox One with Rise. So it was really interesting for me. And so going through it, when I hit the Marilyn Monroe section, that was actually the first time I'd seen that famous Happy Birthday Mr. President video. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have no attention span whatsoever, and whenever I'm watching TV, I'm almost always goofing off and looking at websites and doing stuff. So why not give people something that still is relevant to what they're watching on TV? Why not be engaging? Why not why not make that better?
Now the website is big. You did it for a big name brand of the National Geographic Channel. That's a history channel, sorry. And it's big, flashy. You must have received a bunch of recognition for this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we just picked up a gold pencil at the One Show earlier. It was last weekend, actually, for that, which is super cool. There's a lot of awesome work that goes along with it.
So we won a bunch of advertising awards for it, which are pretty awesome. What else did we get? We got the awards site of the day, FWA mobile site of the day,
and the site of the day at the same time, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Some of the cooler sites, cooler awards from my perspective are the tech awards that we kind of claimed. So we had Adobe Cutting Edge Project of the Week. It was a Google
Creative Sandbox.
That's right. Andy Awards, Best Official Show Website. It's been kind of knock on wood, but it's doing pretty well for itself. So,
and there's been some crossover to other things like CableFax, which is not an internet, not a technology focused, but it's a cable TV focused award show that it did well in. And what was the other thing? Oh, ComArts, Communication Arts, which is more focused on the art of advertising. And I know that sounds silly, but they're like legitimate chances in advertising to make things that are unusually beautiful, and ComArts does features like especially cool, not just like successful in selling a lot of widget stuff, but legit beautiful stuff, and it's really cool to be alongside some of these amazing stuff.
That's interesting. So instead of just winning awards for website-based things, because you built such a broad-reaching website, as a website which is tied into a TV show, but you did on multiple platforms, so you've been recognised on all these different disparate places rather than just the traditional website.
I mean, they're all for, the categories are, I believe, all for websites, but award shows seemingly have been trending more towards focusing or putting a lot more weight behind digital work. So it's great that it's kind of doing really well in those categories.
It's just exciting to be alongside other things that I think are legitimately cool. I mean, advertising is a very self-congratulatory industry.
Totally.
Probably second only to Hollywood. And so, like, that's where the stuff is relevant. That's where the stuff happens. I mean, it's good for business to win this kind of stuff. It's more than anything. It's self-satisfying to make this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, we're both artists in our own way, and like they always say, an artist's work is never done or never complete. And whenever I see other projects that have won, I'm like, how the hell did we even compete with those guys? Like, maybe it's being too close to the project for too long, but it's always amazing when we hear that people are liking it and digging it and exploring with it.
Sure. Well, you just said an artist's work is never done. So with a project, you had a deadline. Now, if you had some more time, so you could add in just one more excellent feature.
Good segue.
Yeah.
Smooth.
Well, I mean, I did a lot of sound engineering, some sound design on this project, and I would have loved to spend even more time with that. I mean, I think it would have been fun to I don't know. I feel like my whole career I've been trying to rebel against the stuff I know how to do well and spend more time the stuff I'm bad at, or less skilled at, or less experienced at. And I would have loved to like score this thing and get an orchestra and like really go crazy on that. But that's hard and expensive.
Yeah. I kind of have to agree. I think making it more immersive is always nicer. There's tons of opportunities where we could have made it more immersive. Some scenes, they had maybe 18 different elements that were parallax enabled, which came to life brilliantly. Some of them had fewer. It would be great if we were able to take an image and cut out every single branch individually and kind of move those and kind of completely make this cinematic thing. I mean, I think it's pretty cinematic now, but the more detail, the more believable.
That said, I mean, it's great to have a deadline. It's great. I mean, I don't ever finish personal projects. It's great to you have to stop now. You just have to.
Yeah.
I don't care. Just stop working on it. Move on to something else. It's actually sometimes nice to have that external pressure.
Totally.
Yeah, I've heard that in order to create anything, you do need some external constraints. Otherwise, you just have no boundaries.
Oh, the worst projects that come in the door for us are the ones where they're like, do that thing you've always been wanting to do. Just do something crazy. I need boundaries to push up against. I need some constraints to rebel against.
Guide rails.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time, Joe and Kenji. Any last things you want to add?
I would actually, I want to call out the one other awesome thing we didn't talk about is the intro to the website that we got. John F. Kennedy's favorite poem growing up was written by a soldier in World War I named Alan Seeger. And if that last name sounds familiar, it's because it's the same name of Pete Seeger, who was a remarkable folk singer, counterculture, revolutionary in the United States during the 50s and 60s, wrote If I Had a Hammer and adapted We Shall Overcome for the civil rights movement. I had the opportunity to write him a letter and get his spoken word introduction, reading his uncle's, I think it was his great uncle's poem, and that was one of the most satisfying things we did. That was fantastic.
It made for a very powerful opening.
Terrifying.
Yes. That's it.
That's it.
That's great. Thanks. So this has been SSW TV. I'm David Barella. Don't forget to subscribe to SSW TV to watch more videos just like this. Thanks.
Thank you.